Hello everyone! So today I decided that we would just do a little fun, easygoing tangent rant kind of video. I decided to go over, because sometimes when I'm bored and I'm laying in bed, I try not to scroll on social media. So in lieu of that, I have been scrolling on things I do have on my phone, which is like YouTube, Twitch, or Goodreads. And sometimes I like to go and see what some of my 5-star reads were. And then that leads me to wanting to read some of the 1-star reviews. I just wanted to say that I will be blurring out the people's names, just because this is not in any way for me to disagree with them. When I was taking the time to read these personally myself, I noticed that I saw a lot of their points. Some of them were a little harsh, but for the most part, I read these reviews and was like, I agree with you. But this is still, that's important to acknowledge, is that we can have different overall outcomes of reading a book, but we can acknowledge that we also have similar standpoints. And for me, what consists of a 5-star read is just how immersed I was in the story and how much I would recommend it to somebody, or if I would reread it. When I first got back into reading, I told myself I would not reread books. I have reread one book. And I think I'm on the verge of rereading a second one, so we will see how that goes. I have a few of the books. These are not all of my 5-star reads. These are just some of them that I thought would be interesting to read the 1-star reviews, and we will go over them together. Once again, I will not be bashing anybody's opinion. I will either be simply agreeing, laughing, kicking my feet, or disagreeing, but there will be no bashing. There will be no, my opinion is true and just and yours is not, and you are wrong and you suck and you don't know literary taste. So that is kind of going to be the vibes of this video. It will not be in any way to make anybody feel bad for having a personal opinion. Okay, this review is a little bit long, but I just recently read this book, so I feel like I can call to mind a lot of the things that are being touched upon while I briefly skim this one. This is Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. And the V.E. Schwab is also just a name that circulates around the community, whether it's on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, like she is there. I tried to go to her book reading in a city that is like 4 to 5 hours away from where I live, and it was sold out. So she is well loved, well known. But of course she is not going to be for everybody. So this book, 5 stars for me. I absolutely devoured it. My personal opinion though, before we get into this review, I probably should have done this for all my other videos so y'all can see that I'm not like switching up as I'm reading reviews, just in spite of these reviewers. But the first half of the book was a little bit boring. Alice's perspective, I hated. I don't know why. I know Alice needed to be there so that we could get the end and the ribbon on top, cherry on top, whatever. That is why Alice was there. But the whole time, anytime we went to Alice's perspective, I was bored. I wanted to skip the chapters. You very well could have done without Alice's perspective until maybe like the last chapter, which is where she's mainly needed. And you could have just kept her as a character in Charlotte. I think her name was Charlotte. I don't remember. It's Sabine's love interest. You could have just kept her as a side character in Charlotte's like story, and then we could have just focused on Sabine and Charlotte. And also, I will say, I know a lot of people don't like Sabine. That is kind of the point. She is a product of her time, of her environment, of when she grew up. Don't ask me the time period, but it was the time period when a woman could not be without an escort and all of that. So she is just a product of her environment. She is rebellious. She did not want to be born in that time period, so obviously she harbors a lot of like hatred towards that. She's very loud and proud in who she is, and her opinion will not be silenced. And then Charlotte, of course, I really liked Charlotte. I thought this was a really interesting take on toxic relationships, especially sapphic ones. I thought that was so interesting. And then vampires, of course, like hello, I love vampires. Don't even get me started. Okay, I'm not gonna read all of this. I'm just gonna touch on certain points. I will put it all on the screen though, so if y'all want to read the whole thing, you are more than welcome to. The pacing felt painfully slow and I was bored for most of it. None of the characters were likable, which made it really hard for me to stay invested, and don't get me started on the ending. I have to say, I have to agree with all of this except for none of the characters being likable. I really liked Sabine's character development, but once she started, this is going to be a spoiler, so I hope y'all have read this. But once she started to lose her humanity, I guess, for lack of better terms, I kind of felt like I didn't like her as much. But before we get to that point, I really did enjoy her story, and her point of view is probably my favorite for the majority of the story. The pacing, I feel like V.E. Schwab's pacing is just the same in all of her books. I feel like it's super long. Her books are super long. So you have to go into her books knowing that you're going to have to get through a good chunk of it before things kind of start unraveling, which is just a V.E. Schwab thing, is what I've noticed from a few of the books that I've read of hers. But I do agree, if I don't feel connected to any of the characters, I'm not going to read it. And then the ending, I agree on that. Y'all, the ending, if you were to ask me what I think would be a better ending, I would not be able to give you, and I would not be able to tell you. But the ending that was given to us, I didn't like. And it has to do with Alice. I just really don't understand where Alice, I get why she was needed, but I felt like there could have been a better way to do it without an Alice. This is basically, okay, so this is talking about Maria. She's one of the most unlikable characters I've ever read about. The first half of the book is mostly about her, and while she's given a detailed backstory, probably to create sympathy, it didn't work for me. Her toxicity is clear from the beginning, and I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. I don't think you're supposed to feel sorry for her. I also don't know. I think this is just my personal opinion. I didn't feel sorry for her by the end of the book. Because once again, she's a terrible person from the beginning, and then she becomes a vampire, and it kind of just becomes more amplified because now she bends to no one. So I don't think you're supposed to feel bad for her. I think you're supposed to just see that she was once a person, but eventually got lost in her ways. But does that mean you feel bad for her? I necessarily don't think so. But obviously I could be wrong. I have not watched any author reviews. That is kind of just how I interpreted it. Okay, the next 5-star book that we are going to be discussing is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. I read this book when I was first getting back into reading as an adult, and I can say that if I probably were to go back and read this book, it might not necessarily be a 5-star read for the reasons that it was a 5-star read the first time I read it. It might be a 5-star read just for the nostalgia and how much I loved it the first time I read it. But honestly, if you were to ask me about a lot about what happened in this book, I don't think I'd be able to tell you. But I love Stephanie Garber. I love her Caraval series, and I love her Once Upon a Broken Heart series. I prefer that over the Caraval series, but this book was still a 5-star read. So the review that I chose, I cannot even express to you guys how bland this book was. Like tofu, like unseasoned chicken breast, like brown bread with no peanut butter. Yes, I have read worse books, but I don't think it's unreasonable to expect the standard of traditionally published books to not be atrocious. The last 20% of this was unintelligible, and maybe I could have looked past the worst of it all. all this cack with people coming back to life with the power of Jesus or whatever, and this elaborate plan to get Tella and Scarlet away from their father when they could have just stabbed him in his sleep like Inho, or that this whole thing was just one big humiliating runaround for Scarlet, making a total fool of herself. Everyone watching her panic and rush around giggling behind the curtains if the characters were not so flavorless. You might think it's clever that it all turns out to be an elaborate game and nothing was real, but it's all such a chaotic sack of nonsense that it just feels like reaching. This whole book is just reaching. Basically like, oh, it was a dream. Do not come to my town. So, I do have to say, once again, just to kind of piggyback off of what I said earlier, if I were to reread this book, I probably would not think so highly of it as I do now. I have read her Once Upon a Broken Heart series, and I read that probably around the same time that I read this series, so a couple years ago, and I reread Once Upon a Broken Heart. I think that's the first book in that series, and it was not as good as I remember, so I can definitely tell you that this is probably maybe more, maybe not, maybe we are not the target audience. I still love this book. I really like Stephanie's writing though, I will say. It's very whimsical. It draws you in. The world building, at least from what I remember, is great. Like, I can remember how extravagant Carnival was. I was picturing Venice. I was picturing like the lanterns at night, and like her and Julian. Like, I can see all that clearly. Scarlet, I know, is not a reader favorite. I personally preferred Scarlet over Tella, so I'm not going to speak on that because I think that's just preference. But if you were to say Scarlet is boring, I could definitely say that. In the same way that I could say that Tella was a little too abrasive. I think my personality just called to Scarlet a little bit more. It was really frustrating though, I will say in this review, it was really frustrating that people kept constantly seeing Scarlet as crazy, and it literally was like a whole runaround, and that could be kind of frustrating for somebody reading this book that isn't into that whole whimsy, like what's going on, magical realism kind of thing. It worked for me, but I completely understand that. Like, if I were to reread it, I'd be like, why am I reading 300 pages of runaround nonsense for a 100-page conclusion? You know? So I get that completely. I just thought sitting there behind like tofu, not just one example, but tofu, unseasoned chicken, brown bread with no peanut butter. 3 examples. I just thought they're not saying exactly what they want to say. So, I don't know if I said it, but the first book is Circe by Madeline Miller. Y'all, when I read this book, I have to tell you, I gave it 5 stars, obviously. It was super slow in the beginning, and I have to say that this book awoke my love for Greek mythology retellings. Since reading Circe, I think I've read 2 or 3 other Greek mythology retellings, and I have about 4 on my shelf that I still need to read, but I have not yet. Just because as readers, you know, sometimes we want to read things and we just don't get to them until we get to them. Anyways, so this review says, this was very honestly one of the most boring, dreadful books I've read. Reading it was a chore. I am once again thankful I do not buy books anymore and instead borrow this from my library. What can I say about this? Absolutely nothing. People call this a feminist novel, a novel of a strong woman who takes back her voice in life. Yes. Okay, I am one of those people. I agree. I believe this is a story about a woman taking back her life and her voice, and it does take a little bit to get through the first couple of chapters, because for me personally, I also hate when the main character is constantly the underdog. I'm okay with the main character being the underdog because you need to see that development sometimes, but when it takes up like 30% of the book or half of the first season in a TV series, I usually cannot stand by that, because at that point I'm not rooting for you, I just feel bad for you. You can literally see this in people's reviews. I read this thinking I was going to get that, but I guess I missed it because I didn't see it that way. I know nothing about Greek mythology, so I read this through the perspective of someone analyzing it without that knowledge. I also am in that same boat. I don't know much about Greek mythology, and I still don't. Regardless of my opinion, Circe is not interesting and is just really fucking boring. Not that I'm the most fun person in life, but Circe would drain my introverted battery by 12 p.m. instead of my usual 4 p.m. She turned men into pigs, and that was what apparently gave her such a reputation with many readers. But the entire book, the pig scene felt irrelevant. I agree. The pig scene, personally, it made me feel kind of like, damn, Cersei, that was a bit left field of you. But then at the same time, what the men did to deserve that, it kind of made sense why she went that route. But I think the story as a whole, her turning men into pigs, is not like the feminist point or the feminist like pinnacle of this whole story. Cersei herself is, and kind of like the ending and how she gets to that ending and all the little things that she had to do and all of the little inner battles that she had to take, not even just inner, but with her family, with her social circle of the gods, the humans as well, because the humans treated her terrible also. All of that, I feel like, contributes. You can't just say one is higher than the other, because then it kind of like takes away from the whole experience of how she got to where she was at the end of the book. So I agree with that as well. If you were to ask me about what Cersei did in this book, I don't think the first thing that would come to mind is that she turned men into pigs. There are like several other things that she does as well that is of equal caliber, I think, in the whole grand scheme of things. I was expecting some sort of revenge against the people who wronged her entire family, or vengeance for her neglected childhood. Of course, I don't know if any of this is accurate, but it doesn't even matter anymore, because even if it is, then I'll find Cersei to be so dull. Her character arc is ridiculously tedious. She reminded me of Addie from The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, where both do nothing but complain and be miserable and are just there. I mean, even the scene where she turns the men into pigs 45% in was so boring. It happened and then it's gone. Back to following Cersei as she does nothing and continue going along with things in her lonely island. Okay, so you literally kind of just contradicted yourself. Like, yes, we follow her through her boring life on the island because she's stuck on the island. But once again, as a reader, it could be really boring to read through that. Like I said, I even struggled through some of these chapters. But I feel like that kind of pacing, the way Madeline Miller did it, was great. Because you had the conflicts with people, and then you also had the slow moments where she's going through the consequences of finally like doing something in those conflicts. So it can't just be rah rah rah, revenge. Once again, this is just my opinion, kind of like how I'm seeing it. But also, like I said, I did struggle when Cersei was the underdog for the longest time. So that's all I'm gonna read in this review, because it is kind of long and it does go a little bit further more into just repeating herself, and kind of the issues that she saw within the story was basically just that there was a lot of repetition. Cersei is boring, Cersei is dull, and she does not speak up for herself. Honestly, when I had read this story, I did not get any of that. I got the complete opposite. I saw Cersei standing for herself, but also in a way where she's still trying to fight that inner self of being docile and obedient and all of that. But honestly, it is not for everybody. Not every book is going to be for everybody. I just thought this review was interesting and a very good point of view, honestly, because if I did not trudge through the first couple of chapters, I probably would have been saying the same thing as this person. But by the ending, I was so in love. Madeline Miller, you awoke my love for Greek mythology retellings, and I can say this, I will say a little hot topic, controversial opinion, I guess. Don't hate me, but between the Song of Achilles and Cersei, I love Cersei more. This reviewer said that Song of Achilles was a 5-star read for them. For me, I think Song of Achilles was 3 stars. I did not like Song of Achilles at all. I liked maybe like the last 30% of the book. But for me, Cersei just hit a little bit more, I think, just as me as being a woman. Not saying that like other people can't relate to Cersei's story, or women can't relate to Song of Achilles or whatnot. But I'm just saying that this hit harder to me than Song of Achilles did, so I did not feel as drawn to the Song of Achilles. So that is my overall, I take. feel like this video is getting kind of long. I did want to do one more book, but I guess we'll go ahead and end it here, just because I've kind of been tangenting a little bit. And these reviews were super long. I love how passionate and creative people get with their 1-star reviews. Not even just their 1-star reviews, but just any review in general. I aspire to write such in-depth reviews with the GIFs, the headlines, the bold text. I just reading the reviews in itself, I should consider reading a book. I'm just kidding. But honestly, I really do love how creative some of these people are in the reviews. Overall, like I said, this was just to kind of read 1-star reviews on the books that I absolutely love. And did this change my opinion on any of the books? No, but I also did appreciate their perspectives nonetheless, because it can also help me see where people might not like a book, but also maybe make me realize, like, hey, you seem like you have good taste despite not liking the book I like. Let's talk about it. Maybe we do have similar books that we enjoy. And I feel like that's also like one of my favorite ways to find books, is to just look through the reviews and see what people are commenting. And if I agree with like some of what they say, I'm gonna click on their page and kind of see what they've been reading. Anyways, this video was just for fun. I hope y'all enjoyed. I know it's a little bit different and there really was no plot to this other than to just read 1-star reviews, but not really come to a conclusion of any of them. And if you guys liked this video and want to see videos similar to this, make sure to subscribe and like this video. Comment down below some of your opinions on the books that we talked about and the reviews that we talked about. Once again, just be kind and friendly, and remember that there is no wrong opinion, and we kind of can learn from each other by talking about our differences or our similarities. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Bye!